We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Steaks, here to preview Kentucky's road trip to Spokane, the Spokane Veterans Memorial Arena, which is not Gonzaga's home court, but it is in the same city in which the Zags play, so it is essentially a home court. This game will tip off 7:30 Eastern. You can watch it on ESPN Sunday night. Blake, I know this is a matchup a lot of people circled before the season, but it's lost maybe a little bit of luster given
I
the
don't
way
think
both
so.
teams play. Well, I mean,
I know
Gonzaga
what you're
got blown
saying,
out at
but
Texas.
I understand what you're saying, but I still think this is I think it's all. I'm not gonna say it's as fascinating, but in a way, it may be because even if they were both undefeated right now, because I think it's fascinating to see how both respond. Like I think, and they'll
Yeah.
well, Kentucky beat South Carolina State, right? But to me, that's not. We don't have a great read on responding from big game to playing South Carolina State. No offense to anyone there. Um, to now coming back to another big game, and so I think in that sense, yes, I understand what you're saying. I do think though there's still obviously you're still talking about two teams that have the expectation of winning a national
Winning it all.
championship, but I think there's something to just seeing how both of these teams respond to these previous games. Again, big games that we've seen with Kentucky losing the way they lost to Michigan State in double overtime, the Zags, getting blown out at Texas. So I think there is a lot of intrigue there to see which team can maybe bounce back in a more effective manner here.
Fair points. Mine would be I would be maybe 10% more jazzed to see both these teams unbeaten going into this,
Yes.
but it is what it is. Let's talk about Kentucky. We talked a lot about the Cats' loss to Michigan State, how Kentucky blew opportunities, how Kentucky has got rotation things to figure it out that it needs to figure out. We talked about that. I heard Gary Parrish on his fine podcast talk and underline a lot of the same things we did. I think, namely, you've got an offense-defense situation, maybe with Frederick and Reeves if they're on the court, both at the same time. Then what do you do with Case and Wallace? Can you play those three at once? You got to have room for a point guard. That's Xavier Wheeler. You got to have Oscar Tshiebwe on the floor. He fouled out the other night. But anyway, it was interesting to listen to Gary Parrish talk and maybe mention some of the same things we had just talked about when we unwound Kentucky's loss to Michigan State the other night.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I know they beat South Carolina State 106-63. I think Cal said after the game he didn't really want to play Tshiebwe, but played him just because of he just felt like it was something to do with. I'll find the exact quote here in a second, but I still think it's again I don't know how much we take away from that game, right? Other than the fact that Kentucky did what, Chris? They hit a lot of threes again. They went 10 of 24. So Frederick hit threes, Wallace hit threes, Reeves hit threes. Good to see in that bounce back, right? But it's just different now coming back into another setting here where you're on another neutral court environment. Although, as we said, it's going to be certainly traveling out closer to where the Zags are. So it's just a matter, I think, of seeing how they look offensively in this game because, again, I don't know how much. Like I said before, I didn't want to overreact to anything we saw necessarily in the Michigan State loss, but I do think there are some things to react to, and that was their offense just being completely, I don't know, like one-dimensional at times. Like it was just sort of, you knew what they were going to do every single time down, and if somebody couldn't take someone off the dribble and isolate and everyone else just kind of standing around, then you really weren't going to get anything else. And that's what I want to see more of, especially in a game like this that you expect to be close. They're going to need to do some stuff late in the game, probably where, hey, if Antonio Reeves is in there, guess what? We have to do something to get Antonio Reeves a shot. So what do we do with that? Do we just pass the ball to Antonio Reeves and everyone else just kind of stands around and she weighs in the post and we just kind of give a little space and just let him figure it out? Or, do we design something specifically with that goal in mind of getting him an open shot? And again, I'm not saying Kentucky has never done this, that they have, but that I think was the frustrating part of the Michigan State game. That's what I want to see in this one against the Zags because I do think there are some things Kentucky can do on the offensive side, with the group that they have, whether it's Wheeler just being able to penetrate and kick to a Frederick or a Reeves, again, we talked about Wallace, how good he's looked so far. And then, of course, Oscar Sheepway is going to be in there. And, so is Drew Timme on the other side. So I think there's a lot of ways you can approach this offensively for Kentucky to really have a chance to have success in this game. But it's just, I think that's the goal versus let's just let our guys figure it out every single time down the floor. And if that results in somebody taking somebody off the dribble or, I just think they need more structure and the offense just can't be as stagnant as it was in some of those late game situations.
Okay, before we talk about Gonzaga, a word from our sponsor, Stakes. You can predict sports better than the crowd for a chance to win NFTs. With Stakes, players can cement their sports predictions against friends, other fans, and influencers forever. Don't let your sports genius go overlooked. Join Stakes and have the best predictions captured in the moment. Head to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 for a double welcome bonus. It is a predictions app. It's not a betting app. Free to join, free to play. You win stuff. You help us out. What's not to like? Go to Stakes today. Again, use that code to get your double welcome bonus. Okay, we are SEC guys, but we're also basketball guys, and especially you. You watch a ton of basketball. So Gonzaga in a little bit of an unfamiliar place, having been blown out against Texas, which is now #1 in KenPom. The Zags have got some questions too. Seems like just reading up, and I've not seen Gonzaga play yet this year, but there's a little bit of a timeshare at point guard. Efton Reed is barely playing. He was expected to start. Now, Drew Timme has been Drew Timme. But what do we make of Gonzaga at this point? Because that's a team that's got a question or two itself.
Well, I mean, again, you're still talking about Gonzaga, and you still see the roster that's there, and understand that there's a reason why they can still get where they want to go. And Drew Timme is obviously the main starting point on that, with everything that he can do, and that I think is going to be. I mean, look, that's the matchup here, right? It's Oscar Tshiebwe versus Drew Timme. Like that's the fascinating part of this whole equation is to see how these two, contribute and produce, with the other one on the other side of the floor. And I think that's going to be kind of fun to watch and certainly see what happens there. But I really think the game is more about everyone else, and I think especially, the backcourt for the Zags is to see what they do in this game here. Because I mean, Chris, let's be honest. If you saw the game against Texas, I mean, they turned the ball over a ton. And again, that's Texas though, right? With a Chris Beard defense, like it's going to be a challenge not to turn the ball over against them. But they turned it over a lot. And, it didn't help that they got off to a terrible start. A lot of turnovers early in that game. And I think that to me is what's going to be interesting here, because I think you want to see, probably if you're Gonzaga, looking at sort of the consistency with the backcourt is going to be a big deal. But we can say the same thing for Kentucky too. And that's why I think that matchup is going to be kind of interesting to watch, because there's a lot of things here, I think, with the Zags, right? And let's keep this in mind too. The last time Gonzaga has lost back-to-back games, you'd have to go all the way back to 2018-19, where they lost by 3 against Tennessee and then turned around and lost by 13 at North Carolina. So I mean, that's been a while, right? I mean, which you would expect, because again, this is just a team that, quite frankly, doesn't lose a lot of games. So I think that's something to consider here. But just the matchup itself, I'm very interested to see the backcourt versus backcourt, and looking at the Zags, Nolan Hickman, looking at guys like that and what they can do in this game. Because again, the turnovers are something that I think you're going to look at with this team, whether, it is Hickman, whether it's Bolton, any of those kind of guys. Like, I think that's important here, because look, Kentucky defensively, good team, right? They're a good team.
Yes.
Are they going to force the same amount of turnovers that a Texas will? It's a different type of style. So
yeah, that's not what Kentucky does.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And I don't think it's one where, if the Zags turn it over 20 times in this game, they're in trouble. Because I just think you're talking about two different defensive styles here. But still, this is a very good defensive team with the athleticism and the length of Kentucky. And yes, I think that will be able to cause some issues for the Zags because they have turned it over. If you go back to the Michigan State game, that's something too. Like, we're not just talking about a Texas thing here, right? Like, they turned it over 18 times against Michigan State. So those are the kind of things where, and look, Michigan State's defense, we said, I mean, you know what you're getting. You're going to get, they're going to force turnovers too. So I think this is one to kind of see where is the Gonzaga guard play, the perimeter play, where does it stand after that Texas game? That's what I'm interested to see here. Because again, I think in terms of just where things stand right now, which that's what we're talking about. I think Kentucky is just in a spot where it's about, how they defend Drew Timme. It's about how, because think about that too, right? You think about it on each side. If a Sheboy or a Timme gets in foul trouble, think about how
Changed
much
the
that
game
changes.
the other night for Kentucky.
Yeah, like it can completely change how both teams play. And so I think that's another aspect. And look, I know we're going all over here, but we're trying to give you as many angles that pop in our head here. And there are so many in a game like this. And yeah, there's so much to it. So for the Zags, I think it's the turnovers. That's the big thing you're circling here, because if they're going to win, I just think it's going to be hard to, make some of those careless mistakes or forced mistakes. They're going to have to make less of those. And I think they'll probably do that, just given that I do think the way Kentucky plays defense, good defensive team, elite defensive team, probably. But Kaysen Wallace on the other side too, right? He could force some turnovers himself.
8 steals.
Yeah. So in that Michigan State game. So I think that's it. Like, to me, that's one of the biggest stories in the game.
Are you seeing a line on this? We're doing this Friday morning. I am not.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, we are doing this Friday morning. I think Ken Palm's got it as a 2-point edge in Gonzaga's favor, which I think is probably, that's probably about what you expect. The home team, gets the nod there. Here's the way I look at this game, right? Kentucky, I think what was so frustrating about Kentucky's loss to Michigan State was that, and this is something other people have brought up, like, there was sort of that first get big game. I don't know if you call it jitters. Maybe you do call it right. Like, maybe that is part of it. Where it's almost like it either took some guys a while, or some guys just could never really get into that flow that we've seen in the other games, right? And I think there's two guys in particular, Chris, that we're talking about there. That's Antonio Reeves and CJ Frederick. Like, I think,
if those guys hit one more 3-point bucket, which they both shot horribly, they're both terrific shooters, Kentucky wins that game. If Sheboy doesn't foul out Kentucky, and that's ifs and buts and all that. But the point is, Kentucky didn't play its best game and was still that close.
Yeah. And I think that's what it comes down to is these guys, and a lot of the guys on Kentucky, have looked great in games against Howard, Duquesne, and South Carolina State. The Michigan State game was certainly a mixed bag, which you'd expect. It's the toughest competition of the group. Now you get the next team that either, is just a little bit better than Michigan State or is kind of equal when you think about how that game played out with the Zags. So and that's why I started the way I started this conversation. I want to see what Kentucky's mindset is and their approach coming out. Are they just going to let, the Zags be the aggressor here? Or are we going to see the Kentucky team come out and say, all right, we've learned from some of the things we did against Michigan State. We're going to go out and, there's more of that confident sort of mentality, because it just didn't look that way against Michigan State. It was a lot of, just reacting. And again, like we said, the situational awareness was terrible. That's something else that you have to circle, I think, as a storyline here. If it gets in a late game situation, Kentucky was bad from a situational awareness standpoint against Michigan State. And so, I honestly, you probably give that edge to the Zags if it's one of those late game scenarios, because what we've seen just in a small 1-game sample size, it was not good for Kentucky. So can they learn from that? Can Cal make the adjustments? I know a lot of people, as I said before, people were really not happy with Cal in terms of how he managed that game against Michigan State. And I agree with some of it. I think that there's reason to be disappointed and frustrated. So does he adjust some of those things? If you are, because you just fully expect this to be a close game, right? I don't think this is going to be the way the Gonzaga game in Texas played out. Um, I think this is going to be a close game, and I just feel like, it's probably going to come down to a final minute stretch or somewhere in there that's going to decide this thing. So that's what I'm most curious to see from Kentucky is just how they are able to bounce back, and are they going to be the kind of team that can, like we said, it's not, you don't have to win these games in November, but boy, you sure need to. You sure love to pick up one of these, and you sure need to show that you're making progress from the previous kind of, sample size of what you in the Michigan State game. That was our first real test for Kentucky, to really look at them and say, all right, this is how we judge this team right now. Here's your second one. And I think, to me, that's going to be very interesting to see if they can get those guys involved. Frederick, Reeves, do they play more together? Sheboy staying out of foul trouble, I think, is a given. That just, you've got to have that in this game. And so, yeah, there's just so much, and that's why it should be so fun. So,
Yeah, Gonzaga will not have a lot of chances to get marquee wins that you need to be a 1 seed.
yeah.
It's one for one of those opportunities so far. It's got Baylor coming up. It's got Alabama coming up. Those will be 2 more chances, and some other decent games in between there. I think the WCC is not a bad league, but it's not going to be Kentucky that it's playing. Anyway, okay, we don't have lines on this. Ken Pomeroy has got Gonzaga winning this one 79-77, I believe, giving these Ags a 59% chance to win. Bart Torvik has got this as Gonzaga a 7.8-point favorite with a predicted final of 83-75 and a 76% chance for Gonzaga to win. Jeff Sagarin has got this if you give a full 3-point advantage for home court, which you might as well. Again, it's not technically on these Ags home court, but it is in Spokane. Sagarin has it 5.5 in Gonzaga's favor. Blake, if you had to set a line, an over-under, and make a pick, what would you do here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough game to pick because, on the one hand, if you start with the Zags, I mean, we mentioned Hickman earlier, and obviously again, we're doing this on Friday, right? And we don't have an update on the Hickman injury, and I think it was his ankle. He had an ankle injury, I think, against Texas. So, all we can do is assume he's going to play, but again, we don't know that because Mark Few, I think the phrase was, doesn't look great. So, that could mean he's not going to play. So obviously that's a big part of it too. I know, his numbers probably haven't been what Zags fans will want them to be to this point, perhaps. But still, I mean, he's someone that he is a starter, right? And so that can significantly impact the game, because I think that's something else to point out here when you're deciding how could this game play out. We talk about Kentucky's offense, Chris, in that game against Michigan State. The Zags offense has not looked great so far. I know they put up 104 against North Florida, but to me, this is not yet sort of that well-oiled machine that you're used to seeing offensively for the Zags, right? Because we say that every year. I mean, you just assume they're going to be in the top 5 in the country in offense. It's just how it works. But this team is not there yet, and I think whether it's turnovers, whether it's forcing shots, those kind of things, I think on the, if you're looking at it from Mark Few's standpoint, that's the kind of stuff you want to see or have to see improve, I think, if they're going to win this game. And again, the injury and all that, we don't know because we're recording this, on Friday. So we don't know yet what that looks like. But I beyond Drew Timme, I still think this is a team that has some things to figure out offensively. So I think that's something to keep in mind here. For Kentucky, I truly think that right now, if you look at it, we know everything is kind of based around Sheboy, but I do think, to me, this is more of a what adjustments have they made from that Michigan State game, and I think that's the story here. Because if they do the same things they did offensively, I mean, they could struggle here because it's a road game basically, right? And I think this is one where I just want to see them continue to evolve on the offensive side, because I just think that's going to be important in this game. Oh man, Chris, this is like, I mean, this is like your definition of a toss-up, right? We always say we're not professional bettors. We're just guys who break down basketball and we try to give you our opinion on games. Um, but like, I don't love the way Gonzaga's offense has looked in two of these big games, but I also know that they've played defensive teams with styles that do force turnovers, and I think Kentucky can do that too. But it's more of, again, it's just kind of different in terms of the defense and how it's set up. But oh man, it's like I want to see Kentucky's mindset before I feel confident about any of this, and so mm, I'm gonna take a chance here and say that Kentucky figures it out and wins at the buzzer or something because I just, I think that they are still in a fine spot, but I think it's just will they learn from the finish to that Michigan State game? And Gonzaga, like I said, have not lost two in a row since 2018-19. So you're already looking at that and thinking they're going to find a way to bounce back. But, you're bouncing back from playing the number one team now, like you said, in Ken Palm in Texas, to playing the number two team in Kentucky, which again, those numbers can be misleading because Michigan State, would certainly like to have a word in terms of what they've done to this point as well. So, it's a tough call. I don't have a great feel
It's
either
fun to
way.
see you squirm in real time.
Well, but I mean, seriously though, that's what I said. Like from the start,
Hey,
right? These are two teams that have just lost big games, and
right.
I mean, it would be hard even if they were both won those games, but still.
Well, look, if you had a definitive opinion at this point, then you're probably ignoring reality on one side or the other, right? And that's what we try to do is we try to be real about where teams are. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Is like both teams are not there yet. And I think offensively, both still have things to figure out. And, again, defense, the competition has played a role in that. But I also just think personnel and chemistry and rotations, those are still things I think that both teams are figuring out. So that makes this a very hard game to predict. And that's where, again, you talk about the X factors of a foul trouble one way or the other with a Timmy or a Sheboy. I think it dramatically changes a game like this because, and you can say that about any game, but I think especially in this game because both got, one guy's on each side. It just, you talk about a recipe for success for that, again, because what can Sheboy do if Timmy's out of the game? What can, Timmy do if Sheboy's out of the game? Like there's a lot of stuff like that. And again, we're not saying they're going to be matched up with each other on every single play, but the point is what they do and how they produce. It can be big. And that's where, that's where a Jacob Toppin, a Lance Ware, a Damian Collins for Kentucky, we talked about like a Reed, like, I mean, what are the roles of those kind of guys? And I think that's going to also be another aspect of this game. So,
all right. Thank you for watching. We are previewing a bunch of basketball games involving SEC teams this year. We are previewing every single football game involving SEC teams this year. We got those up on our channel. When baseball gets here, we'll do that too. But in any case, the best way to catch all our stuff is hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss the live streams. You don't miss the power rankings. You don't miss all the things we do. We're growing quickly, so be a part of what we're doing here by hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon at Southeastern 14.